Hi, sixth grade teachers. My name is Kelly, and today I'm going to walk you through the Middle Ages and Renaissance unit. There are 5 lessons and should take 6 to 7 days to complete. This unit is designed to be a brief overview of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance eras of Europe. Many of the topics in this unit will be very helpful as background knowledge when students reach 8th grade and high school social studies classes. The compelling question for this unit is, why does a culture or civilization change over time? There are 4 supporting questions. What happens when there is a change in power? What happens when there's inequality in the social structure? What happens when an illness impacts a population? And what happens when people make change happen? Lesson 1 is entitled Power and should take 1 day to complete. Begin the lesson by taking a look at this timeline. Give students a chance to make observations about what they see. The Middle Ages and the Renaissance are the only 2 that have been added. Rome and the early American civilizations are included since they were recently studied. There is an interactive for the Middle Ages that can be used to find out more about daily life and housing, etc., if interested. The majority of information for this lesson comes from pages 32 through 34 of the Europe and Russia textbook, where we're learning about the power of the Christian church during the Middle Ages. There are a series of questions to be answered on page 3 of the student packet. Be careful not to dive too deep into these topics, keeping in mind that the theme is power, who has it, and that it is meant to be a brief overview. At the end of the lesson, students will be introduced to the summative for this unit. Students will add information to slide 2 to answer supporting question 1. As you move through the rest of the unit, you will answer the other supporting questions before ending with the compelling question. There is an optional activity for making stained glass windows if you would like to incorporate this into the unit. It will take an additional day. Lesson 2 is about feudalism and takes 1 day to complete. There are a few different images to explain the system of feudalism, but essentially you have the kings at the top, then the nobles own the land, the knights work for the nobles, and then the knights also have peasants who work the land. The system is explored in a brief activity called Feudal M&Ms. The easiest way to do this simulation is to have candy that is used only for the activity and is not eaten, and then to have little fun-size packs of M&Ms for students to eat at the end as a reward. You can also completely eliminate the candy and just use counters or other small items. The idea of this simulation is to explain how the feudal system worked and how it was unfair for those at the bottom. Everyone starts with 10 M&Ms or 10 counters. Because the peasants are paying for protection with their crops, the vassals or knights get 6 from each peasant. Then from those 6, the vassal gets to keep 1 piece and has to give 5 to the noble. Then from those 5 pieces that the noble gets, the noble can keep 2 and has to give 3 to the king. At the end, the king should have a lot of candies. The noble should have about half. The vassals have roughly half of what the nobles have, and the peasants have about 1/3 of what the vassals have. This activity and the discussion should help students answer the supporting question 2 on the summative slideshow. Lesson 3 is about the Black Death and should take 1 to 2 days to work through. Something to keep in mind, the Black Death was a pandemic from the 14th century, and so there are some obvious connections that students might make to COVID-19. Be sure to keep in mind that some students might have experienced loss or trauma from that pandemic, and try to keep the conversation on the Black Death, but do make acknowledgments if students ask questions with connections between the 2 pandemics. The majority of learning in this lesson is from the Black Death DBQ. You can do this a few ways. I would suggest working through the first few excerpts of source 1 as a class. So I would read aloud the source description, I would read the excerpt, and then show students how I would mark in the keywords or the key information. Then we answer the 2 questions and move on to the next one. If students seem to work through the first one just fine, give them time to work through the second excerpt with their partner before checking back in. The second source is a map showing the spread and the outbreaks of the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death. Encourage students with their partners to look through and pull out all the information they can from the map and to make inferences about how the Black Death spread. Source 3 is an excerpt from Black Death from Britannica School, giving more of the scientific side of this disease. Source 4 is a chart showing the impact on population. And source 5 talks about the after effects of the plague, focusing on the economy as well as some of the social changes, particularly with the ending of the feudal system. Lesson 4 is all about change and should take 2 days to complete. It begins with looking at the education in the Middle Ages and finding out that the church controlled much of the education and limited access to only the wealthiest members of society. This meant, of course, that the control and power would remain with the wealthier classes. Then it's time to talk about the Renaissance. After learning about the overview of the Renaissance, there are slides to take a look at a couple famous pieces of artwork, a famous writer, and then there are a couple of minutes to learn about the printing press and the impact that the spread of literacy and books had on society. This video has a couple of things that are probably not sixth grade friendly right at the very beginning, so be sure to only watch from the 31-second point to 2 minutes and 42 seconds. This is about the halfway point of the lesson, so this would be a good time to add some information to supporting question 4 on the summative slideshow. Then you move on to the Reformation and talk to students about how the increase in literacy and the availability of books meant that more people are going to read. In particular, they're going to read the Bible. People are finding out that some of the things that the church was saying and doing were corrupt and that a change was needed. This leads into learning about the Reformation and Martin Luther. Then just a short time is spent on the scientific revolution. The big focus, of course, is to understand that changes were made in the way people thought about science. So we have Galileo and Copernicus and the heliocentric model, which is instead of thinking that the Earth is in the center and everything rotates around the Earth, it puts the sun in the center and everything, including the Earth, rotates around the sun. The Holt textbook gives a nice overview of the scientific revolution. It does hint towards the age of exploration, which does not need to be addressed in 6th grade. You can mention that this is when explorers are going to take a look around other parts of Africa and North and South America. Lesson 5 is the summative, and so this is the point when students complete the compelling question on the summative slideshow. Be sure to encourage students to use reasoning and evidence to support their response to the compelling question. I hope that this video was a helpful resource as you prepare to teach the Middle Ages and Renaissance unit. As always, please reach out to your PLC leader, instructional coach, or curriculum facilitator with any questions or if you're in need of any additional support.